To celebrate Thanksgiving this year, Donald Trump posted the R word, and that wasn't even the most offensive part of the post. Jake Paul looks to see what life looks like without a head. Heading into the holidays, the plumbing of the financial system broke again. Kevin Hassett's top qualification for the Fed chair position is that he's uniquely unqualified, which of course makes him entirely qualified in this administration. Black Friday holiday sales were absolutely gangbusters if you're bad at math. I'd like to hang Charles Guiteau all over again for good measure. Cory Booker stopped talking long enough to tie the knot. PragerU is using AI to bring presidents to life and teach your kids, and it's as shitty as it sounds. Headlines from ProPublica, Truthdig and Baffler, all this and more on this week's On the Record for the week of December 1st, 2025. Let's go. UNFTR. So don't mind my bloated face and eye bags as I ooze tryptophan, carbs, and red wine from every pore in my head. It's the post-Thanksgiving On the Record that I wasn't sure I was going to do, but you know, what the hell. Stock market futures are somewhat muted heading into the trading day today, with the market hedging on the outcome of holiday weekend sales, Amazon earnings announcement this week, and the news that President Trump has apparently settled on his choice for Fed chair, which we'll cover in Max Notes today. Now, in terms of the holidays, many unfuckers know that I'm a fan of the sweet science, and the boxing fairies are delivering an early Christmas present on December 19th, when the world will witness Jake Paul's beheading at the hands of Anthony Joshua. Paul is pictured here at the press conference contemplating how he'll spend his remaining days on Earth. Love is in the air over at the Senate as the world learned over the weekend that Senator Cory Booker has a type. Now, of course, the Senate is designed to be the slow and deliberate legislative body, which is probably why it took the 56-year-old so long to finally settle on a mate, and to find the closest person that he could to his ex-girlfriend, Rosario Dawson. Now, I don't want to take anything away from his now wife, Alexis Lewis, because she is indeed a powerhouse in her own right. But this is as close as you are going to get to an official announcement that this guy's running for president. Well, actually performing a record-long congressional speech that accomplished absolutely nothing and then writing a book about it, due out in March, is probably even closer. Hey, I binged Death by Lightning over the holiday weekend. It's on Netflix, and I can highly recommend it to all political junkies. This is the story of President James Garfield and his assassin Charles Guiteau, based on the book Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard, which is one of my personal favorites and more worthy of a read than the adaptation is of A View, by the way, but anyway, we'll never know what could have been under a Garfield presidency, but it is a reminder that every so often, a hero can emerge for all the right reasons in this banana republic. A boy can dream. And it's also a stark reminder of what an absolute stain on the nation the current executive truly is and how far we've fallen. The Cheeto in charge rage posted a Thanksgiving message to the nation that included the following passage. Quote, "While the worst congressman woman in our country, Ilhan Omar, always wrapped in her swaddling hijab and who probably came into the USA illegally in that you are not allowed to marry your brother, does nothing but hatefully complain about our country, its constitution, and how badly she is treated when her place of origin is a decadent, backward, and crime-ridden nation, which is essentially not even a country for lack of government, military, police, schools, etc." As if to prove how racist our country is and how low our expectations are, that wasn't even the worst part of the post, according to the news media, because he also called Governor Tim Walz the R word. You know what I like to do sometimes, other than just doom scroll through racist Truth Social posts and muse about how a dead James Garfield would be better in the position of the executive than a living Donald Trump? I like to watch old clips of Senator Foghorn Leghorn John Kennedy to remind myself that he was once a Democrat that sounded like this.
Let's go to the videotape.
Well, we have another program here at Treasury that we're very proud of, that we think can help a lot of Louisianians. It's called the START program. That stands for Student Tuition Assistance Revenue Trust.
Also enjoyable is hearing from producer 99 and unfuckers around the globe about things that I fuck up. Now, to the top of the list this week is that I, 1, completely misinterpreted the phrase, "may you live in interesting times," and I was this many years old when I learned that this is actually a curse and not a well wish. Who knew? You knew. Everybody apparently knew except for me. Also, I referred to a Substack writer named Shanaka Pereira as Shikaka, which is now how 99 refers to me in our Slack channel. So, building on some prior themes, one chart that I wanted to share because it's a troubling trend is from the Federal Reserve. The repo market that we've talked a great deal about, this is the one that the Fed uses to purchase securities from banks and non-banks in the open market in order to backstop liquidity in overnight trades. Well, it freaked out again heading into the holidays. It was tapped 3 times just last week at increasing intervals as the plumbing of the financial system shows more and more cracks. It is a nightmare signal that the equities market and the pundit class continue to ignore as we head into the closing chapter of Trump's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad first year back at the helm. Hey, before we head into Max Notes, I just wanted to thank the newest members to the unfucking family. We've got N Ramos 73, LBS, Roy, Granola Mom, Jeff 9MS, and Tenacious J. So these brave souls posted up after our fall fundraising period to help us close that gap to 600 members by the end of the year. So we only have 22 more to go to hit our target, and that'll set us up nicely for our big run to 1,000 members in 2026. So don't forget to visit unftr.com for all of the things, including a link to our online store because 99 just filled it up with holiday-themed merch. You can also shop our line of native roasted coffee manufactured in partnership with native coffee traders. Every purchase supports both the show and indigenous entrepreneurship, and those bundles make outstanding holiday gifts. All right, now with that, let's get to Max Notes. The poly market odds are so stacked against my personal bet who will be the next Fed chair, it's ridiculous. Instead, we've got Kevin Hassett, the head of the National Economic Council, leading the pack with a 71% chance. To show you how far off I am, my guy, Stephen Myron, is sitting at a dismal 1%. He's barely beating out Barron Trump. So Kevin Hassett is a lightweight economist, barely even an economist, who predicted in May of 2020 during Trump 1.0 that COVID deaths would reach 0 by the end of that month. He also said Brexit was a great idea, and somehow this idiot is smoking the guy who's already a board governor, who's been making the rounds on any talk show that'll have him, literally wrote the white paper that designed Trump's entire tariff agenda, and then another white paper detailing how to dismantle the Fed to put it under the authority of the president. But who am I to criticize Polymarket, right? I mean, it's not like they paid for this studio. Even nuttier is the fact that Trump would have to replace Myron with Hassett because it's the only position that will theoretically be available since Trump's gambit to fire Dr. Lisa Cook was struck down by the courts. Now, I've paid about as much attention to Hassett as I have to Howard Nutlick and Peter Navarro. First of all, because Nutlick is an apologist and a grifter, and Navarro literally used to source an economist named Ron Vara in his writings, which is an anagram of his own last name. So, I've been watching Hassett with some greater scrutiny of late, which is why I was keen to see his spin on holiday sales on Face the Nation over the weekend.
And the bottom line, though, is really that wages have been growing faster than prices, and that's why real incomes this year are up by about $1,200 so far. That's why we could have a great Black Friday and a great Thanksgiving sales weekend, because people feel like they have more money in their pockets. Even though you're right, there are some things that cost more and some things that cost less.
The White House has been trotting this guy out more and more lately, basically to tell the American public that these aren't the droids they're looking for when they're staring at their own grocery bills and gas prices. And I got to tell you, it's working on the news media at least, because they parroted the same headlines over and over that Black Friday sales set a record and the consumer is back, baby. I mean, you probably heard the same spin, right? Black Friday sales hit a whopping $11.8 billion. It was up 3 to 4% over last year. Online sales were up 8 to 9% according to multiple sources that were echoed from Forbes to Bloomberg to CBS and on. The coverage is nearly identical across multiple mainstream sources. In fact, the only alternative headline that I really saw was that there was an 800% increase in AI-driven online sales, which basically just means that consumers are taking to ChatGPT and Gemini, among other sources, to scour the internet for the best holiday shopping deals. So, as usual, the more interesting story is below the surface. In-store traffic was reportedly down 3.6%, but prices overall were 7% higher and the total volume was down 1%. CNN at least did some math to note that the upper end of the K-shaped economy was responsible for driving much of the demand for higher-priced goods. Translation: sales were down because of inflation. And this is the graph that tells the whole story. Everything we buy these days is on credit. That is just how it is. Third quarter credit card balances surged again to an all-time high of $1.23 trillion. So there's little doubt that Q4 figures will continue on this same trajectory. And yet, there was Kevin Hassett, the mouthpiece of the moment, in full audition mode for the top banking job in the world, telling us that the price of groceries are down, and in some states, gas is even starting to fall. He even went so far as to say that the reason that Black Friday sales were so great is because, quote, people feel like they have more money in their pockets. You wouldn't let this man run a local credit union, let alone the leading central bank on the planet. Killer Left Take of the Week goes to JT Chapman of Second Thought for the second time because his channel is oh too good. This week, Chapman targets PragerU's use of AI and how the company is leveraging the dismantling of the federal government's oversight to infiltrate state education departments. Our kids are gonna be so stupid.
Of all the goals we have for our education system, learning to breathe the fresh air of freedom, to savor it in every poem, athletic competition, and history book, is perhaps the most important. Yes, even more important than excellence in math and science. Even more important than marketable skills. When students learn to love freedom, they will learn to love America. Look, I know nothing is shocking anymore when the government has gone full tilt blood and soil, but this idea that loving America is the point of education is certainly not great. And it's a lie. Don't get me wrong, it's in line with the rest of what's coming out of the White House. But the real point is to make kids dumber.
All right, time for Chart of the Week. Known colloquially as the Buffett indicator, the U.S. stock market cap as a percentage of GDP was traditionally used as a guide for whether the stock market was fairly valued. So Buffett's comfort range was supposedly between 75 and 90%, with anything over 120% being overvalued. And currently, the indicator is at 224%. And that seems just about right. All right, our first headline is from ProPublica. ICE sent 600 immigrant kids to detention in federal shelters this year. It's a new record. You know, I gotta tell you, we should take the fucking sign off the Statue of Liberty already. Trump's mass deportation plan was one of the primary reasons that he won re-election. That's who we are. We're still separating kids from families. In fact, we're setting records. But kids in cages made for bad optics, so now we just don't let anybody see it. Problem solved. America is and has always been a deeply racist place, but immigrants too have always closed the door behind them. That's actually the American way. From the article. Quote, since the start of this year, some 600 immigrant children have been placed in government shelters by ICE, according to government data. That figure, which has not been previously reported, is already higher than the tally for the previous 4 years combined, and it is the highest number since record-keeping began a decade ago. Next up is a piece from The Baffler. This is one of my favorite magazines, and it reminds me that exquisite writing is still a thing in this country if you look for it. The article is titled, Marked for Life. Tattoos Criminalize El Salvadoran Refugees in the Eyes of Homeland Security. You know, Dostoevsky wrote that the degree of a civilization in society can be judged by entering its prisons. So what does that make America? Or our proxy prisons in places like El Salvador? Our black sites where torture is the only law of the land? Quote, in gangs, as in prison, reputation is survival and so is identity. Tattoos are testimonies of a moment, a reminder of something that seemed to matter at a formative time. But time doesn't stand still. Rather than acknowledge that tattoos may be a product of coercion or a means of survival, or the remnant of an abandoned path, U.S. immigration enforcement uses tattoos as proof of dangerous intent, transforming the body into a physical criminal record that supersedes context, history, and testimony. And rounding out headlines, we have a Truthdig original titled Making China Great Again. I gotta tell you, this one cracked me up, and it also made me a little sad. Trump is such a dumbass that the Chinese media tries to make him sound smarter. And I cringed throughout this entire article because it never occurred to me that an economic adversary, which they're not, because that whole narrative itself is ludicrous, but an economic adversary would have its state mouthpiece make Trump sound smarter to make their guy seem like he at least has a worthy adversary. Quote, this was a pattern throughout the Chinese language version of the meetings. Trump's joshing and joking, considered the regrettable behavior of a barbarian, was simply removed from the official accounts of the meeting as it is irrelevant to the political process and considered to be in bad taste. All right, time for Pod Love and Book Love. Anytime Congressional Dish drops an episode, it's time to listen. This one is called 23andMe and the Sale of Your DNA. So millions of people have trusted them with their most intimate data. But what happens when a company holding 15 million DNA profiles goes bankrupt? So in this episode, you'll hear highlights from bipartisan House and Senate hearings exposing how genetic data can be hacked, shared, retained, and even sold under current U.S. law. And for Book Love, how could we not choose Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard, who, oh my God, I just realized when I was putting this together, also wrote one of my other favorite political books called The River of Doubt about Teddy Roosevelt's ill-fated trip down the Amazon. So anyway, this book is exceptional. Like I said, it's better than the Netflix adaptation of it, but definitely watch that as well because some of the performances are absolutely outstanding. But this one was truly one of my favorite political books of all time. All right, that's it for us this week. I appreciate you tuning in. We have a lot on tap for December, both here at UNFTR and over on our economics spot on Midas Touch Network. So make sure you're signed up for our free weekly newsletter to be apprised of all the stuff that's going on. Just go to unftr.com and sign up today. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel to be notified of new drops because, as you can see, we're inches away from hitting a pretty special subscriber milestone. So hopefully the next time that we're together, you will have helped us cross the 100,000 threshold. This has been On the Record for the week of December 1st, 2025. Godspeed and good luck, unfuckers.